Hey girl, welcome back to the Win a Pageant podcast. I'm your coach, Alicia Darby. Now today's special guest is Kristi Dosh. Now Kristi is a publicist, but she got her career started through her work as a journalist, and she's done a lot of work with ESPN, which is super cool. So in today's episode, I really ask her a ton of questions about how pageant women can use their message and their platform to get onto various media. We cover podcasts and how to get on television, both local and national television, newspapers, and even speaking gigs to promote your platform. So she's going to deliver a ton of information. I highly recommend having a pen and piece of paper, or at least your phone out to take some notes, because this is so valuable. Please welcome Kristi. Hi, Kristi. Welcome to the Win a Pageant podcast. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. This is going to be super exciting because I know you have a ton of background in television, working for ESPN, and of course in pageantry. And I know you're helping some women right now in pageantry. So for those that don't know you and haven't heard your story, could you share a little bit about your background and what you're up to now?
Yeah, absolutely. So from a professional perspective, I started my career as a corporate attorney, which I know sounds so exciting. So I did that for about 5 years. And on the side, I was blogging about legal issues in sports. I'm a huge sports fan, and I really was doing it totally for fun. Didn't think it was going to lead to anything. And after a couple of years, had the opportunity to go write for Forbes, and that led me to the opportunity to work for ESPN. And I added other mediums like radio and eventually podcasts and TV and public speaking. And really transformed my career, but my life changed how different my life is now. I work from home. After I left ESPN, I decided to become a publicist and to teach other people how to do the things I had done with guest blogging and TV and speaking and radio and all that kind of stuff, and genuinely enjoy what I do every day, which wasn't necessarily true when I was an attorney.
Oh, yeah.
So when I had the opportunity to be in a pageant, I was really excited. I had wanted to be in a pageant since I was a very small girl, and it was not something my mother embraced. And so I never got to do pageants as a child. And when I was engaged, I met a woman, and she was telling me about her experience in pageants. And she was talking about Mrs. Pageant. And I don't know if I even really realized that world existed. But at the time I was engaged, and I thought, yes, I'll get married and I can do a Mrs. Pageant.
How perfect.
I know. So I did get married in 2014. And in 2015, I competed in Mrs. Florida International, and chose that system after some research because of the emphasis on platform. And I knew I was a good public speaker. I was really excited about the interview portion, which is maybe what everybody else dreads, but it was the part I was excited about. And the part that I enjoyed the most. But like, I had to get a walking coach. I didn't really know how to walk for a pageant. I had to have somebody help me pick out my gown. I got a trainer so that I could get in the fitness wear and not embarrass myself. I mean, it was such an interesting world to be part of. And what I learned is I'm much better at helping other people than being in the pageant myself. So I have retired after one pageant, but I've had the opportunity to work with some of the women I met competing that year who have continued to compete themselves, and to be able to help them get radio interviews and land newspaper articles and pitch themselves for TV. And I realized I enjoy that so much more than being the one who's in the spotlight. So I'm glad I did it, because I made all these pageant friends that I can help now.
That's such a cool story. And I appreciate your reflection too, having had this desire for so many years and then be able to actualize it, but then realize like, okay, well, that wasn't exactly what I thought maybe. And I kind of like doing this instead. Yeah. So that's cool. And I just have to highlight too what you said about being excited about the interview. And I'm sure that it comes from your experience in when you're on camera, when you're on the radio, when you're used to doing those types of interviews, then it becomes so much more natural and so much easier to pull the right stories, to share the highlights and things like that. So we're going to talk a lot about that today, like how those skills are really transferable. But then I love that you're already working with pageant women, because as we know, the media can amplify the message in so many different areas in a million different ways, and really bring the eyes to a woman's platform in pageantry like none other. So
Yes.
From your experience in the media, because I know your role right now is really to help others as a publicist, But what is a publicist really, and how do you function in that role? Like, share a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I work with people in a couple of different ways. I have what I would call done for you services where someone hires me and I essentially do everything for them. Now, if I land them a guest blog or podcast interview, they've got to deliver on the back end, but I'm the one piecing together the pieces of their story that I think are media worthy and then finding the outlets that make the most sense for them. Where can they reach the people who can have an impact on their platform, who can get involved in the things that they're planning and the events that they have coming up. So it's finding those right outlets for them and then doing the actual pitching. So I'll write the pitches, I'll find the producers and the editors that need to be pitched. I'll do everything and then come back to the person and say, okay, I landed you an interview on TV next Tuesday, and then we'll do prep for TV. If it's TV, if it's a guest blog, I'll help them with how it should be structured. I'll do editing before we send it to the editors. So, sort of planning everything and taking as much off their plate as I can. I mean, that to me is really the beauty of done for you services is I can take all that off your plate so that you can concentrate on other things.
Yeah.
But I was just going to say people
Yeah.
can't always afford that option. So
Yeah.
there's definitely other options.
Yeah. And the speaking of the done for you, so that is, like you said, that is definitely for somebody who is either like myself. I get overwhelmed easily by all of those moving pieces because those things you just named them because you're good at them and they come naturally to you. But for someone who doesn't do this on a regular basis, finding the people, like just that alone, finding who do I pitch this to that's going to actually be the decision maker to decide whether, and then not just that, but how do I pitch this? How long should the
Right.
email be? What things do I need to talk about? And then, of course, just figuring out the story, which angle are we going to, all of that really does help to have an outsider's perspective. As a pageant coach, that's one of the things that I'm able to do is look at a woman from, it's so hard to do from any of this stuff from yourself, not
Mhm.
impossible, but it is important to have somebody else an outside perspective and say, hey, let's consider it like this. So even if it isn't fully done for you, having that guide along the way is just wildly helpful. So you mentioned that there is, I think you have a group program as well, right? Can you
Do.
just quickly tell us about that as well? We'll dive into that details of it a little bit later, but just what's that look
Yeah.
like?
So I created that because I kept meeting women that I really wanted to work with, but who couldn't be at that done for you price point, but were worthy of publicity and could certainly get it for themselves. I always tell people I'm my own best case study. I never had a publicist. I was pitching myself. So it's absolutely something you can do yourself, but most people have no idea to do it, how to do it. Even people I meet who have PR and communications degrees, they don't teach you how to pitch yourself. And
Yeah.
so my program's all about teaching you how to develop your story that's going to make you what I would call pitch worthy, how to write the pitches themselves, and then how to identify the outlets. So, which outlets should you be pitching? And then, how do you find the contact person? How do you find their email address? When is it appropriate to follow up with them? All that kind of stuff. Sort of start to finish, everything you need to know to be your own publicist. In fact, if I was going to hire a new employee, I would put them through this program. So, it really is everything I know about how to pitch and be your own publicist. It's just you've got to put in more of the work for this option.
Yeah. And you know what I like about this option is that it can sort of grow with the person, right? So then they're learning along the way instead of, I think sometimes we get excited about, oh, I have a brand new title and now I want to go out and, but then there's a lot of things to be done. It's like, okay, well, we got to think about your accolades. We got to think about your story. It's not just you hire someone and they do all the,
Yeah.
there's still elements involved in the creation. So the group program is probably a really great place for people to start too, because then they can really flush out a lot of the details themselves and kind of.
Yes.
So many pageants, especially at the national level, when someone receives that title, the crown is on their head, they sort of automatically get somebody who is their publicist. So oftentimes pageants will be able to promote their title holder and do a lot of the work that you're describing for their title. However, to get that title, they have to sort of already have a lot of background in media and speaking and at least have the skill set to prove that when they do go on TV or they do go for Good Morning America, the Today Show or something like that, they're prepped and they feel calm and
Yeah.
they feel prepared for it. So what are some tips that you might present to pageant women that, and maybe let's start with the back end. So somebody who's just thinking like, okay, I'm hearing this and I get it. I know that media is important and I want to do this, but where do they even begin? Let's start with that.
So I would say start local. So look around, whether it's your local community. Like I live on a small island, so I might look at the newspaper and the magazine that are right here on my island. We're 12 square miles. We're not talking about reaching a lot of people, but it's a start. And then I'd go a little bit wider. I'm just outside of Jacksonville, Florida. That is a pretty decent sized media market. So I'd look at the newspaper there, the TV stations that have shows that would have guests on them, the radio stations. And then I just kind of grow people from there. So if somebody comes to me and they've already had some local, they've already been on their local TV station, maybe they've had a feature article in the newspaper, then we would go bigger from there. But if you've had nothing, I'd say start really small, start in your local community, because what you can do is those pieces that you get. So say I was in my little local newspaper here on my island. Okay, once I'm featured there, I can use a link to that article to pitch myself to one of the TV stations in Jacksonville, because now I've got a little something. Someone else has already written about me in a nice, concise way. They've told my story. I've already gotten a little attention. That makes a real difference as you pitch yourself to bigger and better outlets. So I always tell people it's kind of like building a foundation for a house or a set of stairs. You start at the bottom and each piece builds on the piece before it. So don't feel bad about having to start right there in your local community, because you're going to be able to use that and leverage it to get bigger stuff.
Yeah, that's good. And you're right. And then also I would say that sometimes the bigger stuff can be very overwhelming if you haven't done the local media before. So as someone who just walks into a giant news studio or a big set, and you're asked to have in 30 seconds to tell your own story and to tell all your talking points and stuff, and you only have this story. It's so much easier to start with the local media as practice for the title holder herself too. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So okay, so the first thing is really like identify your markets, like identify the areas, maybe the newspaper, the channels that you're really reaching out to. So once I've identified the channels, then what should I do?
Okay, so it differs depending on what you're trying to get. So if you're trying to get TV, you identify the show you want to be on. A lot of times it's going to be a morning show. And all you do is call the station and say, who books guests for Good Morning Jacksonville or whatever the show is. Just ask the switchboard operator who answers the phone. They'll give you the person's name and email address. They're used to getting asked that. It's not a big deal. If they say they're going to put you through to the person, I always just say, I'm not ready to pitch right this second. I just wanted to know who the appropriate person was. If you can give me her email address, I'll reach out to her on my own later. And then they're fine to do that. I've never had an issue with it. And that will get you to the exact person you need to be for TV. For other outlets, I would say for radio, you want to look for the programming director. I wouldn't go directly to a host or to a producer of an individual show when it comes to radio. So my husband's been in radio his whole career. So this is advice I got from him. You want to go to the programming director because sometimes they can get you on more than one of their shows. So if you go to the programming director who oversees all the shows at the station, including some that maybe you're not as familiar with. Maybe you don't get the chance to listen in the morning because you're at work, so maybe you're not as familiar with the show that comes on in the morning. If you go to the programming director and tell them who you are and what you want to talk about, they can direct you to the correct shows. So for radio, look for the programming director who you can quite often find on the website and find their email address. And then for things like podcasts, you do pitch the host directly. You can usually find a contact form or an email address for them right on their website. There was another medium I would say, a newspaper. If you wanted to be featured in a newspaper, the easiest thing there is to look for a writer at the paper who has previously done features on people. It doesn't have to be other people in pageants. It can just be maybe a local person who started a business or just individual features on people. And you go ahead and pitch that writer directly. Say, I saw this great feature you did on Jim Rogers, and I think I have a great story to share too. Here's, a little bit about me. And you pitch your story, and that can be a great way to get a feature in the paper.
Oh, that's great. Good. Wow. I love this. This is so good. Okay.
That's a lot to throw at people, I know, but that'll get you started.
It is, but it's so great. And you're right. It is just getting started, because then there's all the little details of how those conversations go and how to make them successful in that. But you're right. To just get started, this is a perfect entryway. So we identify the channels that we're looking for. The next step is that we contact them and say, who is either the program director or the producer or whomever who does the booking for the guests. Excellent. Okay. Then what do we need to know about the actual pitch?
Okay. So there's two kind of ways to go about it. I think that we always tell people you want to look for something that's newsworthy. To some degree, it's just newsworthy that you are a title holder. Okay. So you could just be going to them to do a feature on you as a title holder, especially if we're talking local outlets. And it doesn't have to be super local, like here on my island. It could be Jacksonville, it could be the region. But that can be newsworthy enough depending on what you're pitching and sharing with them your platform and your mission and what you're going to do with your title. That could be enough. But the easiest way to get media for anyone is to pitch around something that's trending in the news or an event that's coming up. So if you have an event that's coming up for your platform, there's an annual fundraiser or something of that sort, it's going to be a lot easier to get coverage around that specific event. The other way to do it is things in the news. So let's say that you were someone who specializes in reducing gun violence, and you see that there has recently been an incident in the United States involving gun violence. You can actually offer yourself up as sort of an expert source on that because stations are going to be covering it, newspapers, TV, radio, they're all going to be covering it. But what you need to do is explain why you're passionate about it, what your background is, the organizations that you're involved in that are helping to end gun violence, and offer yourself up for commentary. They're always looking for people who can come on and talk about those kind of things. And they don't like using the same experts over and over. And if you're concerned about calling yourself an expert, if you look and you see people who are like national security advisors who are going on and you're thinking, I don't have that level of knowledge. What I tell my clients is you are an expert on your own experience. So let's say that you decided gun violence was your platform because your best friend was shot when you were a child. Usually we have some sort of personal story behind our platform. That's what you leverage. You are an expert on your own experience. Nobody knows what you went through and why that you're so passionate about this more than you do. So you pitch yourself around your own experience, not around academic and professional credentials, unless you have them. I mean, if you have them, by all means, use them, but you don't have to have them, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's good because the heart story. So in pageantry, we call this the heart story, and it's like that thing that people can connect to on a personal level. So news isn't always just fact, 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 fact. This happened, this happened, this happened. The thing that pulls people in, that makes people want to watch the evening news, is because of the story behind it. And so
Yes.
what I hear you describing is, first of all, think of something that's newsworthy. So what's trending, what's hip, what's happening right now, and then how are you an expert within that, within your story, within your background, credentials, those types of things. Yeah. So
Exactly.
that's really how we highlight ourselves to pitch, is think of your connection. Like, how are you connected to this? So let me ask you this, Christy, so let's say that there was just a big incident that happened in the States, and I say, hey, that's something that my platform is revolving around. How quickly do I really need to react to pitch myself for that story? Because news moves so quickly.
Really fast. So I am a journalist and primarily still in the sports space, and I will get emails from people sometimes within minutes of something being announced. Not so long ago, there was a big scandal that broke in college basketball, and I immediately started getting emails from people, particularly in the academic arena. I get a lot from PR departments at universities that are pitching their teachers as sources. And I mean, those emails start coming, I would say, within the first 2 or 3 hours after a story breaks. Now, it continues usually for 2 or 3 days. I mean, most stories have a shelf life of at least a couple of days, but it's the people who get in earliest that are going to have the best shot at being included because, I know as the journalist who gets it, you get this like barrage and you take the first few that are a good fit for you because you're in a hurry too. You need to get your story out, or for a newscast, they've got to get their segment ready for that evening, or whatever the platform is, they have to move fast. So that's why it pays to have pitches already prepared in advance. So even though you're going to be waiting for a news story for the specifics, you can still put together a pitch and have it drafted and mostly done, and then change out just a few tiny things once something happens in the news. It's called in PR newsjacking. And there's a lot, and it doesn't have to be something horrific like a mass shooting. I have a client who's an expert on marketing, and when April the giraffe was pregnant, remember, it took like weeks and weeks and weeks before April had this baby giraffe, and it was all anybody was talking about. So there was actually a huge window of opportunity to capitalize on the news around April the giraffe, and she ended up having me pitch a piece to Entrepreneur Magazine about marketing lessons that any small business could learn from April the giraffe. And it was all about how they had managed social media around April the giraffe. So it doesn't have to be a negative story. You don't have to wait for something horrific to happen in the world. Anything you see happening out in the world and you think, I can add to that conversation, that ties in really nicely with what I'm doing. That's newsjacking, and you can pitch yourself around that.
That's good. So what about holidays? Would that be like if your platform is healthy eating and it's around Christmas, or would that be something that would also be kind of tied in?
Absolutely. And even, you know what, that's a good example because I just had a client not so long ago who her expertise is healthy eating. And she pitched herself at the start of school about how to pack healthy lunches for your child. So yeah, it can be something that simple. I always look at, there are these calendars that'll show you the, national everything, National Chocolate Chip Cookie Day and National Peanut Butter and Jelly Day, whatever. Those sorts of things, although they sound kind of hokey, in particular TV, they love that stuff. And so we keep a calendar for our clients and watch out for national holidays like that we can tie into. And it's actually fairly easy to get our clients on TV around those holidays. They're so silly, but that's newsjacking too. That's a perfect way to do it.
Yeah, and it's fun. And again, it's more experience, just those
Yeah.
opportunities to get out there and do that makes it so much easier to do the next one and the next one and a bigger one
Yes.
and bigger one. Yeah. So cool. So for a holiday, as a journalist, like how long do people plan in advance? Are they just planning like a week in advance, or is it days in advance or months?
It depends on the outlet. I would say for TV, a really good place to be is pitching 3 to 4 weeks out. Sometimes you can get away with pitching a week out. Like every once in a while, I'll miss a holiday that's coming up or something in a community that I don't live in that I didn't know about. And it'll be like a week out and I can still get my client on. But I would start reaching out 3 or 4 weeks out. And that way, if you don't hear back from them, you can follow up when you're about 2 weeks out. A lot of times they plan their shows just a couple of days in advance, but you have some producers who are super organized and they've got all their stuff lined up a month in advance. So I'd say 3 to 4 weeks is the sweet spot.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Gosh, and I'm just, as you're saying this, I'm thinking like, oh man, this is the benefit of having someone else do this for you.
Yeah, it is.
Because all this calendar stuff, like I'm just thinking about real life keeps going. And a lot of clients of mine, pageant women, are in school or they're working full time and doing a million other things. So to be thinking about the upcoming holiday that's coming 3 weeks from now, and it's constant, there's like always opportunity to step into that. So what stands out to you when you receive a pitch for somebody who wants to work with you, who wants to be covered by you? What are the elements that make you stand out to choose someone over someone else?
So I would say right off the bat, you want to make it clear in your very first sentence, first paragraph, why you're pitching this person. So if I'm pitching, I used the example earlier, if you're going to pitch for a feature article and you go find a writer who's written features on other people, I would start my pitch with, I recently read the feature you did on Jim Morris, and I would link to it. Okay. Then they know I am, it's a targeted pitch. Like as journalists, we get so many pitches for things that are not in our wheelhouse at all. I mean, I get stuff for things I've literally never written about ever. It's not even close to anything I've written about. And it's so annoying. We get a lot of these emails every day. So if I open it up and you make it clear from the first sentence, you've actually read my work. And maybe if you only read the one piece, that's fine. Yeah. But if you make it obvious you did your research and you have a reason you chose me to reach out to, I'm going to keep reading. Okay. So that gets them to keep reading. From there, I always like to hook people with what I call a shocking or surprising fact or stat. So I would look for something, let's say you are the person who's pitching around gun violence. So I would look for a stat about how many people die in the US from gun violence every year, or the US compared to another country or something, some sort of stat that makes it obvious this is an issue. Now, we all know it's an issue, but still, if you can really pull a shocking or surprising fact, especially if you're in a more niche area people don't know as well, I put that right up top. And then I go from that into what I can help discuss or explain and what my background is around it. And then the one thing I've started putting at the end of all of my pitches that makes a big difference is to tell them what their audience is going to walk away with. So I literally have a sentence that says, your audience will walk away knowing how to, or your audience will walk away inspired to, like, tell them exactly what their audience is going to walk away with, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if it's TV, if it's a conference organizer and you want to speak there, a podcast host, whatever. The gatekeeper of any kind of platform like that, their number one goal is to deliver value to their audience. So if you make it very clear in your pitch what value you're going to provide to them, that makes the odds of getting a yes go up exponentially. When I started doing that in my pitches, I could tell it made a noticeable difference in the positive replies I got back.
That's so cool. Yeah, that's a great tip. And you're right. As a podcaster myself, when my interviewees come on and they're like, "Yep, here's what I'm going to be able to deliver. Here's my 3 tips, or here's my framework, or whatever." I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's good because my girls
Yep.
can use it." So
Right.
yeah. So for the people listening now, it's like the same things you want to walk away with. You've got to explain what are other people who are going to be listening to you going to actually be able to
Yeah.
do with the information. Yeah. What value do you add? That's so good. Wow. You just gave us the perfect outline for a pitch. That's awesome.
Yes.
Good. I love it. So cool. So how often then in the industry, maybe in television, newspaper, it's probably a little bit different in each of these, but in your experience, after the pitch is sent, let's say it's now selected, how soon should you expect to hear back from them? Is it something that sort of can get tabled for months, or is it usually like lickety split?
It depends. It depends kind of on what you're pitching. Now, if you're pitching something around newsjacking, if you found that trending topic in the news that you're going to pitch around, I would make sure and put that in your subject line, something like, commentary on, X shooting. They'll know it's something that just happened. So I would put that right in the subject line to make sure they open it fast. TV, they tend to respond to you pretty quickly and they tend to get you on pretty quickly. That's not a very lengthy process for TV usually. Now, you might not get a yes on the first try, but that's usually pretty short lead time. Podcasts, much longer. So, for example, when I work with clients who have books coming out, I always tell them we've got to start pitching well in advance because it takes podcast hosts 2 to 3 weeks to get back, I would say, on average. Then they're going to send you their schedule to book a time to come on the podcast, and you might not be able to get in for another 2 or 3 weeks. Then they're going to have to do all their post-production work after you record. So from the time you pitch to the time your podcast interview goes live, that can be a couple of months sometimes. So when I have a book launch client or somebody like that that has a specific date they're shooting for, we try to back up 90 to 120 days and plan our publicity from there because you need that much time to get a lot of it set up. A guest blog, you can usually get up within a couple of weeks. Radio usually happens pretty fast. Speaking takes a long time. Out of all of them, speaking takes the longest. If you want to pitch yourself to be a speaker at an event or a meeting, that usually takes months because they have them so booked out. So you want to get started on that early.
That's good. That so helps to have those timelines because I know a lot of women want to their national pageant is coming up like 2 months from now, and they're like, oh, I better do a bunch of, and these things you got to be on top of it, girls. It's
I
like,
would say at least 120 days. That's what I tell my clients who have a specific date, whether it's because their book is launching or a lot of my clients are coaches who have services. Maybe they have a new program that's launching. 120 days is the bare minimum I like to work with. I mean, I would love to have more than that. I used to not take people if they gave me less than 90 days. Now 90 days makes me nervous. You really need 120 days to get a solid plan together and get things in place. And that's not counting speaking. 120 days is not enough for speaking.
yeah, much more. Yeah. How long would you want to start, a year in advance, 6 months in advance?
Yeah, I mean, I'm working with people now who are probably 9 to 10 months out from their pageant. And you really do need that kind of time to land a few speaking engagements, especially the better ones. It takes a little while to reach out and to get on their calendar. And it depends if you're pitching for something where they have a monthly meeting versus something where the conference happens once a year. But speaking definitely takes a lot more time to pitch.
Yeah. Yeah, like a Rotary Club, Kiwanis Club, Key Club,
Yeah.
things like that are a little bit easier to kind of slide
Yes.
in. They're localized, so they probably need more people versus, yeah, like a national conference or even a local conference in the area. Yeah, that's good. Good tip, Christy. I'm digging this. Cool. So tell me this. So let's say that we've done the research, we've found the media outlets, we identified the people that we need to contact. We've solidified our pitch and made newsjacking or figured out a way to make it newsworthy and then delivered the pitch, and then we're magically accepted. Now what? Right? Because now it's like, oh my gosh, it's time. Like, I got to really deliver this. So what advice do you have to actually prepare for the delivery?
I would say podcasts are probably the easiest because most podcast hosts are pretty organized and will send you something to fill out. And they're asking, like, what are 3 points you're going to make and what's the biggest takeaway for the audience? Usually they'll kind of guide you through the content. So to me, I think preparing for a podcast interview is probably the easiest. TV can be tougher. If you've never done TV before, I highly recommend you try to find someone you can do at least one session with. I do them, plenty of media trainers do them, because that's not something you want to go into blind. I did the first time that I went on TV, and I wasn't looking at the right camera. I was on live TV. No one told me where to look, and I wasn't looking in the right place. And it was horrifically embarrassing. Now, I'm lucky that they let me come back again and they showed me where to look.
Yeah.
But I have had clients who have come to me after they've either pitched themselves or they've worked with someone else and didn't get that kind of training before they went on TV, and have made all sorts of blunders. I have one who, when I called the producer to get her on again, the producer said, I can't have her on again. She wasn't prepared last time. And I had to like beg and plead and say that I would prepare her personally to get her back on. TV is very much a place where it can be one and done. If you go on and you screw it up, those producers, they have so many options. They won't come back to you again. So to me, TV is really serious. And I would work with someone who can prep you on what a TV segment's like, what kind of things you should wear on TV, what you shouldn't wear, that kind of stuff, and just get you prepared so you know what to expect when you walk in the door, so that you are at ease and you're comfortable and you're confident, because that will show. If you go on TV and you are scared to death, it will show. The TV exaggerates everything you're feeling. So I definitely encourage you to prepare for that. Speaking can be tough to prepare for if you've never spoken before. Again, there's lots of coaches you can work with to help you put together your speech, or you could do something like Toastmasters. Depending on where you live, there may be all sorts of free resources for you to work on speaking for guest blogs. Most editors will give you a format that they like for their blogs. They'll give you what they call a style guide that'll say, your subheadings, everything should be capitalized. They'll give you kind of general rules for that kind of stuff. So that'll kind of walk you through how to put that together. So every platform is a little bit different. Everything's going to be scary the first time you do it. And then the more you do it, the better you're going to get at it, and the better the product is going to be. So I think that's the other benefit to starting early and to starting small and local. You can get your practice in, get it in early, and still have plenty of time to work up to bigger and better outlets and get those big opportunities that really make you shine and shine that light on your platform and the foundation that you're working with, or whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah, that's great. And you're right about it just can grow and kind of snowball and create this just beautiful thing in someone's world. Would you be willing to share a story of one of your clients who has gone through this process and done the work and then had a major win on the other side of it?
Oh, I've had some really great ones. The first one that comes to mind when you say that, and it wouldn't be someone in a pageant, because I haven't done as much of that work, but I had an author come to me, a self-published author, and she told me that her dream was to have a book signing at Williams-Sonoma. So I'm like, okay, we can do that. So I call Williams-Sonoma, and they're like, we don't work with self-published authors. They say, got to be traditionally published. Your SKU has to be in our system, blah, blah, blah. Well, I hate to be told no. And if you tell me no, I will work 10 times harder to make it happen. So I had called a store and gotten that answer. I called Williams-Sonoma's corporate office, and I was like, there's got to be something we can do here. How do I get her SKU in the system? How do we make this happen? And it turned out that they had a test store. And actually, she's in San Diego like you are.
Oh, cool.
And it turned out that Williams-Sonoma had just opened a test store in San Diego by coincidence, and that they were open to trying new things. And so they agreed to do a book signing. They had a test kitchen where they mic'd her up and let her have 4 hours in the test kitchen. Everyone in the whole store could hear her because she was on the loudspeaker. So she cooked and did demonstrations, and she signed her book. They loved her so much, they asked her back. She's been on every major television network in San Diego now doing cooking segments. She's had her recipes in print magazines. She's done tons of speaking, including a TEDx speech. And she's someone who, when I talked earlier about this idea of being an expert on your own experience, she wrote a cookbook. And she is not a trained chef or pastry chef. It's a dessert cookbook, and all of the recipes in it are gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free, and it's because of her own personal experiences with health issues around gluten and dairy. And then also she describes herself as a sugar addict. She talks about how she worked in a bakery when she was in high school, and that at the end of the night, she would dig defective desserts out of the trash can and eat them. And then she would end up feeling terrible afterwards, like not just terrible from a psychological perspective, but like her stomach would feel
Yeah.
terrible. And it led her to eventually discover that she had this gluten and dairy intolerance, but also that she was addicted to sugar. And so when we pitched her, she had no academic or professional credentials. She owned a Pilates studio. She had no formal training with baking or anything. She had just cooked in her mom's kitchen growing up, but she had written this cookbook. And so we didn't position her as, this renowned pastry chef or anything like that. We positioned her as a sugar addict who had dairy and gluten intolerances and overcame them and developed this dessert cookbook, essentially trying to make desserts just for herself. And then she ended up sharing them with friends, and it ballooned into this book. And people loved that. They didn't care that she didn't have the traditional sort of background and accolades. They cared about her willingness to share her story, and it has gotten her so incredibly far. She, I don't want to play favorites, but she has been one of my favorite clients to work with because we have come so far.
Right. Yeah. And she sounds like a go-getter, to fill space for 4 hours when you've never done it before.
Yeah.
And it's your dream. And now you've got a microphone over your favorite store with your own book. Like, I'm just thinking of all of the what if statements probably floating around in her head of like, can I really do this? And she had to overcome that and really deliver to the point where she's invited back. And now that experience has led to all these other things. It's like the importance of stepping outside your comfort zone.
And, once you have that, it's so, like I was saying earlier about, you pitch these things and you're able to leverage them. We got her the Williams-Sonoma thing first. That was like the first weekend her book was out. We had that planned for. And at that point, she hadn't done TV yet, but we'd been pitching her for TV. We just hadn't been landing it yet. Well, after that, I was able to pitch and say, Laura recently did a book signing at Williams-Sonoma where she was cooking in the test kitchen for 4 hours. We were able to change her pitch and to kind of leverage that. And she started getting in the door. And once she was in the door at one TV station, it was much easier to get in the door of another TV station and sort of build from there. So, you get your foot in the door, you take whatever that first opportunity is and know that you're going to be able to use it and leverage it to get bigger and better opportunities.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. And you were saying this is an example of somebody who is not a pageant contestant. However, most successful pageant contestants have what we call a legacy project. And it's a product or project that they are involved in that it takes them to deliver. And it's a part of their story and it's a part of who they are. And it's something exactly like what you're describing. I've had clients that have written their own books. I have a client who's done a cookbook. I should send her to you. Yeah. And it is.
Yes, I now know more about marketing cookbooks than I ever wanted to know. I can't cook, so I think it's hilarious that I ended up marketing this cookbook. I can't cook anything that's in this cookbook.
That's hilarious. Yeah. Well, you don't have to because you've got skills in other areas that can benefit. Let her do the cooking. You do the publicity. You guys are a good team. Yeah. Oh, gosh. So tell us more about your group program, because this is something that I think a lot of now that they see the opportunities that are involved, and yes, they could probably go out there and you've given enough information, they could just do it. But I know that it goes so much deeper because the competition is truly huge. So can you share a little bit more about your program and how people can find you and get involved in that?
Yeah, so something like this program can get you on track faster and take out, I think, a lot of the trial and error you might run into. Plus, you get support from me. So you still have access to me, but you're not having to pay the rates it would normally take to work with me. So there's a private Facebook group. You not only get access to me, but also all these other people who have gone through the program from all different walks of life and with all different backgrounds. And the great thing about it is, someone will post in there about an opportunity they had and they'll be describing themselves and what they did. And someone else will chime in and say, hey, I worked with this editor last week who would love to hear from you. Or, hey, I actually put on this program through my day job and we would love to have you as a speaker. I just saw that happen last week, actually. So there's some really unique opportunities with everyone working in tandem.
Totally. That private Facebook group thing is key. We have one on my pageant interview game plan, and it is incredible. Just the conversations that are happening there, the opportunities that people are passing off to one another. And just having like that group mindset is so, so powerful. So that's cool to hear that that's a part of your program as well.
Yeah. And it's lifetime access. So let's say you're preparing for a specific pageant right now, but maybe you'll be in a different one next year and a different one the year after that. It's lifetime access to the program so that you can keep coming back to it. And it starts from that sort of idea of the heart story from pageantry and how that would translate into what we call in publicity an expert statement. But I think it's very close to the same thing. So you would see how that develops from a publicity perspective and then how that goes into your pitch. And I talk about kind of the formula I use for putting together pitches. And I give tons of examples. I show a speaking pitch, a TV pitch, a podcast pitch, a guest blogging pitch, and these are real pitches I've used with real clients. And as a matter of fact, Laura, who I just told you about with the cookbook, her examples are in the course. And so you get to see what her pitches, the real pitches look like. Because me, I'm a visual person. Like if you tell me I need to write a pitch, even if you told me the pieces, like I need to see what one looks like. What does the finished product actually look like?
Yeah, like how long is it? How short are these sentences? Yeah, you really need to.
I give tons of examples of that kind of stuff. And then we talk about how you build your pitch list. So how do you find the right outlets for you? How do you find the contact person? How do you find their contact information? How often do you follow up with them? And then there is advice that's specific to TV, to podcasts, to guest blogs, how those pitches might look a little bit different, what it's like when how do you write a guest blog that gets accepted? Like when you actually write the blog, how do you write something that they say yes and they publish? Or for TV, I give some of those lessons about what do you wear on TV? What do you not wear? What do you avoid? What is it like when you get on a set, that kind of stuff. And then we also talk about how in the last module, we talk about how do you leverage these opportunities? So you've gotten them, but what are some things you can do with them on social media, on your website? Maybe you have an email newsletter list. Maybe you have a partner or a sponsor that you work with, some things you could do to tie in with them. So it's kind of start to finish everything you would need to get started and really be your own publicist, but have that support. You have me, I do office hours once a week in the group for an hour, and you can ask me anything, but you can also just post in the group at any time during the week and get advice from me. Another publicist on my staff, Megan, is in the group answering questions as well. And then you have all of these people who've already been through the program, mostly women. We've had a few men come through the program, but it's mostly women. And like I said, they're all from different industries and different walks of life. And you never know when one of them is going to have a connection that's going to help you out. I love it. That's my favorite part of the program.
Yeah. And because it's all online, right? Everything you do, so people are really all over the nation. That's a cool thing.
I've even got a couple of Canadians that are in there now. And I recently had a woman from New Zealand who I think joined.
Yeah.
So we're going global, but definitely an emphasis on the States. And it's great the connections you can make with other people and and who they can lead you to.
Yeah, that's really wonderful. Wow. So where can people go to find more information about this? What's your website?
Okay, so my website for my business is guidemybrand.com. And if they want information specifically about that group program, which I actually just reduced the price of recently, so I'm glad we're doing this after I had the price reduction, there is a one-time flat fee, or you can actually do monthly payments for 6 months. So there's a couple of different options to make that affordable. And you can find that at guidemybrand.com/shadows to spotlight.
Shadows to Spotlight. Oh, I like that. How
the
fun.
program is called From the Shadows to the Spotlight. So guidemybrand.com/shadows to spotlight.
Wow. Oh, perfect. Good. And I'll make sure that we link those up underneath the video and in the show notes and everything so people can just easily click them and check everything out. That's so cool. Wow. Well, Kristi, I just want to take a minute to honor you for all of this value that you have just delivered to women, because this is definitely a topic that is becoming more and more popular in pageantry. Women do really want to, they see their message as valuable. The world is seeing pageant women as more valuable than ever. So it's definitely really, really perfect timing. And the way that you do your work is beautiful. Like, I love how you show up with definite clarity, but it is in such a loving way. You really are able to just deliver things in so much love and support, and you aren't afraid to just give your best right up front. So I so appreciate you, Kristi. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad that we ran into one another, actually through a client I have who had been a title holder, and I worked with her on her business after her title. So I'm excited that we were able to connect.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. It's been my pleasure. Thank you again for being on the Win a Pageant podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for watching today's episode. If you loved it as much as I did, would you give it a big old thumbs up? Thank you again for watching, and I will see you on the next Win a Pageant Wednesday.